What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to the SI Sooners podcast. Parker, man, I don't know about you, but I gotta be honest, I didn't sleep a whole lot last night. I was still pretty charged with adrenaline when I got home from Dallas at 2:30 in the morning. So I watched a little college football final, and then I started rewatching the OU Texas game. And let me just say, it was the best of games. It was the worst of games, as we talked about on the wrap-up video yesterday. Incredible swings, incredible spikes, shifts in momentum, but also stretches and stretches of bad tackling, bad blocking, bad quarterbacking, bad receiving, and you know what? Bad coaching. It was like the perfect OU Texas game, which means it lasted forever and it was harder than heck to cover. And man, Parker, I hope that one doesn't ever leave my memory.
It was fun, though, wasn't it, John? I mean,
it was fun.
Oh, my goodness. What didn't that game have? Had a little bit of everything, as you mentioned. Some great plays, some atrocious plays. The flow of this game was just so impossibly difficult to follow, too, because, by the end of it, you're sitting there 4 overtimes after the fact, and you don't even remember what went on in the first half, which was a pretty good half of football, a pretty eventful half of football. So much has just been buried in my memory in the early stages of that game, John, just because we played 8 periods, 4 quarters, 4 overtimes, and I'm comfortable asserting that was the best and the worst OU Texas game that's ever been played. My goodness, it was just 2020 all encapsulated and summarized in one football game, wasn't it?
I'm John Hoover. I'm in Tulsa. That's Parker Thune. He's in Norman. Thanks again for listening to the SI Sooners podcast. We appreciate you guys. Thanks also for watching the SI Sooners podcast on YouTube. I got a quick note about the YouTube channel at the top of the second segment. A little bit of news for you, all you viewers and subscribers, so please be here for that. You're going to want to hear that. Parker, I just got back from taking the dogs for a walk just to try to get my body stretched out a little bit after being in the car for so long and, get some, whatever it is, I don't know, endorphins going, whatever that is that helps you kind of clear your head and think better. And, of course, for about an hour straight, I thought about nothing but the football game we watched yesterday, and getting my little dog to stop trying to pee on every mailbox. But, yeah, there was so much from that game yesterday. I mean, every game, it seems like there's, it's a 3-hour, 4-hour game. It seems like there's so much that happens that can impact the outcome of the game. And every OU Texas game, it just seems like, maybe because I've got more Red Bull and I'm just paying attention more. I don't know. But it seems like there's 10 times as much stuff that happens during an OU Texas game that actually affects the outcome of the score. And then yesterday it was like 100 times as much. It was that many single individual plays that could have taken this thing one way or the other. Parker, how much fun was that? But at the same time, did you see some things out of the Oklahoma football team that weren't there before?
Well, yes, John, and let's start with the obvious. They won a close, well-contested, down-to-the-wire football game, which we haven't seen from the Sooners on a regular basis in a long time. This was exactly the kind of game, John, that the Sooners lose. Those 2 wins over Baylor last year were kind of the exception and not the rule. These are the kinds of games that the Sooners have fallen short in time and time again. And there's no overstating, John, or rather no understating, I suppose, how much the Sooners needed this one. Not just to prove that this is the kind of game that they can win, but to alter the direction of their season. The difference between 2-2 and 1-3 is astronomical. You go down 1-3 to start the season, that third loss coming to your most hated rival, and you run the risk of losing the locker room if you're Lincoln Riley at that point, because nobody expected you to be in that situation. And 3 losses, 4 games in, you're already essentially done in the Big 12 picture. You have no shot at climbing back into the championship race. And so the fact that the Sooners were able to come out on top by hook or by crook in this contest, still trying to process how it all happened, John, but the fact that the Sooners were able to come away with the win has got to be immensely significant for team morale and for the direction and the course of the team's season. As you look ahead, they get a bye to recover from everything they just went through physically and emotionally. They get to go to TCU, take on a real downtrodden Horned Frogs team fresh off a loss to Kansas State. And then you got road trips, 2 more of them before you come back to or rather one more road trip, I suppose, just the road trip to Texas Tech before you come back home and face Kansas. So things could start to snowball in the other direction here for the Sooners. They could string a few wins together. This was the kind of thing that Oklahoma really desperately needed to turn the tides and change the momentum 3 games into the season.
I want to hit on a couple of elements this segment about this game. And you know what? Since we have an open date next weekend, like you mentioned, we can really kind of linger on OU Texas, and these are fun. So number one, I thought Oklahoma really won the line of scrimmage yesterday, both offensively and defensively. On defense, they had 6 quarterback sacks, 9 tackles for loss, and they really could have had a lot more of each. If you remember, last year they had 9 quarterback sacks and 15 tackles for loss. That's piling it up against your rival. But, they own the line of scrimmage just absolutely up front 2 years in a row, and yet the game comes down to the last few minutes 2 years in a row. So just goes to underscore, no matter how well a team is playing, no matter how much of an advantage they might have, this game is so good and so intense that the team that's kind of out of its element a little bit, in this case Texas, still has a chance to win the game. It's unbelievable. So much fun. And then, even though it was less so on offense, I thought the offensive line did dominate at times. You look at TJ Pledger's rushing totals, 131 yards on 22 carries, 2 touchdowns. The O-line had their best game of the year. Texas, if you look at the stats, actually averaged 4.9 yards per play, while OU only averaged 4.8. Some of that's on the defense, of course, but OU had a lead in total yards, first downs. I thought they protected pretty well. Third downs were about even. If you look again at the offensive line, man, Anton Harrison, true freshman at left tackle, playing against Texas, dude absolutely handled his business. So I think this is all a good thing. Think about this. OU has won 5 straight Big 12 titles. They've beaten Texas 4 of the last 5 meetings. And yet they're still playing harder than Texas. Texas, who has, of course, Oklahoma has guys who Texas didn't want. Guys who were ranked lower in recruiting than what Texas has. I think that shows, remember that question we got in the mailbag last week about possibly having a broken culture, or maybe at least a culture that's kind of in need of some serious upkeep, or possibly even trending in the wrong direction. I think yesterday shows that the OU culture is probably just fine if they're still playing that hard against Texas, Parker.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned it, John. Texas still recruits better than Oklahoma year in and year out. And Lincoln Riley does more with less than Tom Herman does. And you see that in the field, in the Red River Showdown over the last few years. Oklahoma finds a way to get it done in the end. That showdown in 2018, that shootout that went down to the wire with Cameron Dicker making the 40-yard field goal to win it, that being the notable exception. But Oklahoma has consistently found a way to get it done via an entire team effort. It's never been one guy that elevated them to victory over the Longhorns over the last 5 years. It's always been everybody chipping in, everybody doing their part. You saw that yesterday, John. Marvin Mims, the true freshman, being the first to record a touchdown in that game for the Sooners. The coach's kid, Drake Stoops, playing hero in overtime. Woody Washington getting his first career interception. TJ Pledger having a career day. Marcus Major finding the end zone for the first time as a Sooner. Everybody did their part in getting this win for Oklahoma, John. And that's what you love to see, because that shows you that Oklahoma's not reliant on one player to get victories. They're not reliant on one guy in order to be in a position where they're contending for a Big 12 championship. They're not reliant on a single player. If worst comes to worst, and you got a situation where, as we saw yesterday, Spencer Rattler is struggling in the first half, there are guys that will pick up the slack for him. And that's the kind of culture that Oklahoma has to continue to cultivate, a culture where everybody has everybody's back. And it doesn't matter if one guy doesn't bring it. If one guy doesn't bring it, you got a guy alongside him that's going to compensate for his poor performance with a fantastic one of his own.
Yeah, and then a guy like Trey Brown, who has embattled this season through the first 3 games, and everybody wants him out of there. And what does he do? He breaks Sam Ehlinger's heart again, this time with an interception rather than a sack and a safety in the end zone. The other thing I want to hit on off the top, Parker, is I thought Spencer Rattler yesterday, thought he really grew up. I mean, you got to admit, I think we wondered, right? We wondered when he was unable to put together, game-winning quarterback comebacks in his first two Big 12 games against Kansas State and Iowa State. We wondered if he had that makeup, that DNA, that being cool in crunch time, that Joe Cool kind of persona, that quarterback that's going to, no matter what the score is, John Elway is going to lead you back, We wondered, is he poised in the pocket when his team needs a play? Is he seeing the game? Is he getting the ball out? Is he putting it on the money? That didn't happen in the first two Big 12 games, but it did happen against Texas. Now, I was impressed by that. Does Texas's defense play hard like Kansas State's does or Iowa State's does? Not exactly, I'll admit. But those guys, as we said, they've got a lot of 4-stars and 5-stars on that roster. Those players are pretty good, and Rattler stood in there. I thought he made throw after throw and play after play, especially in the overtimes, right up to the two-pointer, the dart that he threw to Theo Weiss to finish off the game. I think OU fans can really get excited about this, and this is kind of a coin with two sides here. One, he played his best football, again, in the overtime periods, and then, he threw 2 touchdowns, he ran for a touchdown, he threw that two-pointer to Weiss. He didn't really come close to having a turnover, which is good in the overtimes. He played confident. He didn't overthink anything. He was just kind of playing football, just kind of slinging it, and he was really good. And then the other part is, dude got benched. He got benched in his first OU Texas game. You kidding me? We're going to talk a little bit more about that coming up, but what a disappointing feeling that must have been for him and his family and his friends and everybody that was supporting him, and all of a sudden, boom, he gets pulled from his first OU Texas game. You got to be like, ugh. But he comes back. He's given a second chance. And Parker, he made absolutely the most out of it.
And you got to give a lot of credit to Lincoln Riley for that decision, John, because that took guts to take your redshirt freshman quarterback, the second highest rated quarterback recruit in the history of your school, and sit him down after his second turnover of the half. Go with the unheralded redshirt sophomore out of Waco, Tanner Mordecai, and say, you know what? We need Mordecai to come in and stabilize this thing for a couple drives, put us back in a position where when the second half rolls around, we can feel comfortable about rolling Rattler back out, and where he can afford maybe to make a mistake or two and still be able to come out of here with a victory. It was a really gutsy call by Lincoln Riley to make that decision to roll Mordecai out for, what was it, 2 drives, 3 drives, but most of that second quarter, and give Rattler a chance to collect himself, to take stock of the situation, soak in the environment, which I don't think he got the chance to do, and just become aware of his surroundings and get to the point where he felt comfortable going back onto the field, because he didn't look comfortable. And the one touchdown that he threw in the first quarter was a brilliant play design by Lincoln Riley. That was more on Lincoln Riley's shoulders than it was Spencer Rattler's. But for the most part, in the early goings, Rattler didn't look comfortable. He didn't look settled down. And you got a guy in Mordecai that's more experienced in that Sooner system. You give him a couple drives, get a touchdown run from Marcus Major, and then you roll Rattler back out in the second half. And he's able to come back out revitalized, reinvigorated, and play mistake-free football for 2 quarters plus 4 overtimes. And I think this was really good for Rattler as well, John, to realize that he's not above reproach, right? He might be the most highly touted, most hyped guy on this roster, but if he makes mistakes, and if he puts the ball in harm's way, and he puts his team in a position where he's endangering their chances of winning the football game by turning the football over, that Lincoln Riley's not afraid to make a switch. And he did that with Tanner Mordecai, and it wasn't permanent, and we got to see Rattler come out very, very strong in the second half, John, much stronger than he looked in the first half. But I thought it was perfectly timed for Lincoln Riley to make that switch, and I thought rolling him back out in the second half was the proper decision, and really gave the Sooners a chance as a team, and not just Rattler as an individual, but gave the Sooners a chance as a team to settle down, calm down. They didn't fall behind, which was important. The defense stepped up when Rattler made those mistakes. And in the end, it played out ideally for Lincoln Riley. And you would like to have not blown that 14-point fourth quarter lead, but at the end of the day, your offense did enough to win you a football game.
I'm going to give you my 2 cents on Lincoln Riley's coaching job coming up. But up next on the SI Sooners podcast, beating Texas was not the Sooners' only win over the weekend. Trade pros Heat and Air in Oklahoma City Whether you just need service or a mini split for your home office, studio, or man cave, or if you're finally ready to upgrade to a more efficient train system for your entire home, get a free estimate from Trade Pros for all your heating and air needs. Trade Pros earned a Best of 2020 award from HomeAdvisor and has nothing but 5-star reviews on Google. Go to TradeProsOKC.com or call 405-675-0176, or just book your appointment on Facebook. Trade Pros, that's one word, Trade Pros Heat and Air. Follow SI Sooners on Twitter at @all_Sooners. Find Parker at Parker Thune, Thune. I'm at John E. Hoover. Parker's on Instagram, Parker Thune. I'm on Facebook, John Hoover Media. You know the drill. Our website, of course, allsooners.com. I'm just going to say the uploads at allsooners.com never stop. I thought our game day content Saturday was extremely strong. We had one of our best days ever in terms of traffic. You people rock, and you deserve a lot of credit for that. We appreciate it. We had all the press conferences. We broke down the biggest plays, the top performances. We pulled it apart from multiple story angles. So I want you guys to check that out, allsooners.com. And remember, I can't stress this enough, it is all free, including our community section. It's free for now. We may be changing that in the near future. We shall see. But for now, it is free. Community section's free. Get on there. The community section is growing every day. It's basically like a message board. Get in there and let us know. Let everybody know what you think. And, of course, the video version of this podcast right here is over on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. You can leave a comment there, too. I think literally everyone else does. So hop in there. Let me know. Quick note, if you are watching on the YouTube channel, the channel itself, the one that you guys have been watching for the last 3 years, the one that's, really taken off thanks to you, well, I can't stress this enough. This channel is going away eventually. I don't know when. I do not know when. It is a weird technical snafu between YouTube and Google and a couple other things. I don't understand why. I don't understand why things have to be this way with major giant corporations, but they are. It is what it is. So what I want you to do is subscribe to my other channel. I'm pointing at a card right now. I'm going to flip it right up there. All you got to do is click on that. I have created another YouTube channel. This card, all you got to do is click it and subscribe and jump right back here and finish watching the video. For the time being, I'm going to post everything you enjoy watching right here over there as well on the original channel. Both channels are going to have content, but here's your incentive to subscribe to that other one. All right, you listening? I'm going to be posting all my videos on that channel first. So priority is starting to switch over to that channel. When everything's posted over there, then I'll come back here. Trust me, stick with me on this, and we will figure it out. You don't have to do anything but subscribe to that other channel, and then when this one goes away, boom, you're set. Okay, Parker, man, I know we shouldn't get too excited about things that may or may not happen in 2 years from now, but was the really big news over the weekend that OU beat Texas? I mean, OU always beats Texas, right? The Sooners were a 2-point favorite, no big surprise. Sam Ehlinger's now lost to 4 different Oklahoma quarterbacks, no big surprise. Tom Herman, he's 1-4 against Lincoln Riley, no big surprise. So was that the big news over the weekend, or was the bigger news the latest verbal commitment that the Sooners picked up in recruiting?
Well, I tell you what, that bodes well for the Sooners' future, John. And, we were sitting at dinner last night. I was telling you, I can't wait for Red River Showdown 2023, when presumably, barring any massive changes of events in the recruiting scene, you're going to have Caleb Williams on one sideline, and you're going to have Quinn Ewers on the other. And that's going to be fun. And both those guys are going to have a lot of weapons. And as you mentioned, the Sooners do pick up a verbal commitment Friday afternoon, or Friday evening, I should say, just before the actual Red River Showdown on Saturday morning. Luther Burden is the number 14 overall player in the country per 24/7 Sports' composite rankings in the 2022 class. So he won't be coming along down the line for another year. So he's a class younger than Caleb Williams, Kamar Wheaton, all those guys who have already signed to OU in this year's cycle, or presumably will sign to OU in this year's cycle. But I tell you what, John, Burden's tape is fantastic. 6'2", 194 pounds. He's a very versatile wide receiver. And I know it's kind of all too easy a comparison to make liken him to CeeDee Lamb. But Oklahoma could very well elect to use him in that offense, much like they use Lamb. And I think he stands a very good chance immediately as a true freshman of being able to step in and do what Marvin Mims has done this year and make an immediate impact, especially as a threat in the red zone. And I tell you what, Caleb Williams is going to have no shortage of really talented wideouts to throw to if and when he assumes the starting job in Norman. Because you look at the guys they got this year, you got Marvin Mims, you got Jalen Conyers. Those are obviously the two that headline the class in terms of pass catchers. 2021, you got Jalil Farouk, you got Mario Williams, Cody Jackson. And then 2022, you're looking ahead. You already got Luther Burton. You already got Jordan Hudson. You very well might land the number 1 overall wide receiver in that class in Caleb Burton out of Texas. And so, I tell you what, John, that Oklahoma offense, 2022, 2023, circa that era, is going to be dangerous. It's going to be really scary given the playmakers that they already have and a lot of the guys that they have eyes on and have not yet brought in but hope to, i.e. Kamar Wheaton.
As we discussed over dinner last night, Jalil Farouk can play in the backfield. He can play in the slot. He can play out wide. And you mentioned Luther Burton's versatility as well. Is he one of those guys that can go all over the field like that? And the question I keep getting, can he play defense? I think he's an offensive player only, right?
I would say so, John. He is very much your prototypical outside wide receiver. And, I likened him to CeeDee Lamb. I don't think Oklahoma's going to get too creative with him. He's an extremely talented wideout. They're going to keep him out wide. I don't imagine they're going to move him around much, especially if Oklahoma manages to pick up Billy Bowman. Because at that point, not only do you have Farouk, whom you can move all over the field, but you have Bowman, whom you also can move all over the field. So there's going to be a lot of versatility in that Oklahoma offense, and I don't think there's going to be any pressure on Burton to play multiple roles. I think he will be firmly established at the X or the Z, and he'll be expected to be the downfield threat, be the guy that you would presume would be receiving 10 to 15 targets per game, the primary wide receiver by the time he's a sophomore or junior, the primary target for Caleb Williams or whoever is playing quarterback for Oklahoma at that point in time.
Well, 10 to 15 is a lot for a team that's got a lot of weapons like this, but we'll see. I don't know if he can play defensive back, but by the time Luther Burton gets to Norman, if he gets to Norman, presuming, again, 2 years from now. Actually, it's like 13 months from now, 13 and a half months, he'll be signing a letter, presumably, somewhere. Early signing day 2021, right? And then coming in the class of 2022. I don't know if he can play defense, but they may not need him to, honestly, because Saturday against Texas, I think we saw Alex Grinch finally take a chance on some guys, and I think on the whole it was an outrageous success. My opinion, you saw Woody Washington play corner. He comes in, he gets an interception in the end zone. You saw Joshua Eaton come in and get some time at corner. I thought he played pretty well in a very brief appearance. You saw Jeremiah Cordell play, I think, both safety and nickel, I believe. And I thought he did fine. You saw the freshman DJ Graham come in, get some playing time. You saw Bryson Washington finally come in and get some playing time. Parker, I think you saw the future out there for OU playing in pretty much their first really big game, and I think OU fans can take heart that these guys did well in their debut.
Yeah, certainly. And I tell you what, John, it really seems like those younger guys in the secondary might be a better option than some of the more experienced guys at this point. Pat Fields was not impressive yesterday. Buki Radley-Hiles had another awful performance. And you mentioned a couple of those guys. Jeremiah Cordell had a real nice game. Joshua Eaton looked really good on the outside. Woody Washington did get away with the pass interference on his first career interception. But hey, that's part of playing defensive back. You got to know what contact you can make and where you cross the line. And he played that ball very well, all things considered. And so I would not be surprised, given what we saw yesterday and how successful it was in that second, third quarter when we started Alex Grinch start to move some pieces around in the Oklahoma secondary. You saw Trey Norwood at safety as well. I would not be at all surprised if we start to see a lot more rotation. And that's one of the things that Grinch teased in his press conference last week, John. He said, I think we're getting to the point where we'll be able to rotate a lot more. And given the fact that some of those younger guys had really, really strong performances in the biggest game of their life, in a situation where you're going up against your biggest rival in one of the wackiest seasons and one of the wackiest circumstances that college football has ever seen. It would not surprise me at all if some of those guys continue to get more snaps and more run in the Oklahoma defensive backfield. And we'll see where that takes Alex Grinch in this secondary, because I think there were some definite steps forward yesterday. They're not where they want to be, and I don't think anyone would claim that they are. But yesterday was a step in the right direction for Oklahoma.
Yeah, yesterday was progress because, as Lincoln Riley told us last week, he said they've had guys quarantined or contact traced for 10, 14, some of them 28 days. And he said, we're getting those guys back. And he was talking about a lot of the freshmen. And you got to presume he was talking about a lot of the freshman defensive backs. So I think that was evident yesterday. Parker, I asked Grinch if this performance in the first 3.5 quarters against Texas felt any different than the way the defense played in, the first 2.5 quarters against Kansas State or the first 3 quarters against Iowa State. Surprised me. He said it kind of did. He said there was in terms of just the domination, he said that if you think about it, Texas came in number 1 in the nation in scoring, 51 points a game, and 5 minutes left in the game. You've held them to 17 points, and I tweeted out the statistics, 9 tackles for loss and 4 quarterback sacks at that time, and just one statistic after another, 6 punts, 5 3-and-outs. But then what happens? Just like clockwork, the offense and the defense can't put together back-to-back possessions to support each other in the fourth quarter, and here comes Texas. This team, they were fortunate to win yesterday. That's obviously the next step forward. You play to win the game, obviously. But how can they absolutely dominate people for 3 quarters like they do, and then all of a sudden they're like incapable of getting a first down, incapable on defense of getting a stop, Parker?
Well, it's baffling, John, because, as you said, it's almost become predictable at this point. I turned to you in the press box with 4 minutes left to go in the game, and I told you, hey, this is exactly where Tech had Texas, and Oklahoma is no better on defense than Texas Tech. So don't be surprised if this game heads to overtime, and this game is tied by the end of regulation, and lo and behold, here comes Sam Ehlinger and the Longhorns. And it's really, there's no better word than baffling, John. There really isn't, because it's clearly a mentality issue. I don't think it's a scheme issue. There's an element of scheme, I think, because it took Alex Grinch way too long to put a spy on Sam Ehlinger in the late stages of that game yesterday. But to me, it seems like Oklahoma, as much as they realize it, as much as they're cognizant of it, as much as they talk about it, and as much as they want to change it, they continue to take the foot off the gas in the fourth quarter, assumedly take a win to the bank. And we saw that after Woody Washington's interception yesterday. With about 6 minutes left in the game, the celebration was on that sideline. They were checked out, and that was the first moment, John, that it really concerned me that the Sooners were going to blow that lead. Because you can't take a win to the bank with 6 minutes left, even though everything was going in the Sooners' favor at that point in time. That game was far from over, and Sam Ehlinger and the Longhorns proved that. To me, you got to put your money where your mouth is, and the Sooners aren't doing that. They talk about keeping the pedal to the metal for 60 minutes, and it's 3 weeks in a row now that they just haven't done that. They haven't. And I don't know what changes. I really don't. But it's one of those things that I think invariably gets traced back to poor leadership. And I'm not saying Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley are poor leaders necessarily, but what I'm saying is they're not setting the right tone for this Sooner team when you get down into crunch time. Their mentality should be, all right, let's ramp up the aggressiveness. Let's step on their throats, right? Let's take what we've done over the first 50, 55 minutes of the game and kick it up a notch for the closing stretch.
Yeah.
Let's give them absolutely no hope of climbing back into this game. But time and time again, we see the other team climb back into the game. Where does it end, John?
They're maturing. They took a step, I think, by winning the game, playing well in the overtimes. Maybe the next step is finishing strong. Something Alex Grinch said yesterday, I was very impressed by this quote. I don't know if his old coach at Mountain Union told him this or what. He said, you're never winning the game. You're never losing the game. Said the game is not won or lost until there's zeros on the clock. Somebody needs to tell the players that. We're going to run long probably on this podcast just a little bit because I want to get to one more thing this segment. How about the referee giving Texas an extra 36 seconds on their next to last drive? Just what? Because they're nice? Because Tom Herman didn't talk back all game, so he gets an extra 36 seconds? Man, the Big 12's got to answer for that one. That is an egregious mistake that you just cannot make if you're the officiating crew, Parker. I mean, selfishly, dude, I'm home at 1 a.m. last night and not 2:30 if they just don't cheat.
Well, John, here's the thing. At that point in the game, I was just such a mental wreck, given everything that had already transpired, that I wasn't even sure if I was processing that correctly. Because I think everybody realized that, okay, they just put 30, 40 extra seconds back on the clock. But we just kind of wrote it off as, oh, I must have missed something, or I spaced, or did I miss a play? But no, you go back and you look at the tape, and the Big 12 refs actually put 36 extra seconds back on the clock for the Longhorns. Where does that come from? It's like, you have so many people involved in that decision-making process, involved in the replay review. And by the way, there were like 15 replay reviews yesterday, John. It never seemed like those replay reviews would end. It seemed like every 5 to 10 minutes, they were taking another look at something in the booth. So as much as they were going to review, you would think that by that stage of the game, they would have had all of those things ironed out and that they would have been able to come to the correct decision collectively and not give the Longhorns an extra half a minute to make something happen. And
it was incredible.
I don't know. There's no justifiable reason why it happened, John. But like I said, this game was as 2020 as it gets, and that is Exhibit 1A of that.
They reviewed a play where a Texas receiver caught the football on the numbers, took like 7 steps, and then was tackled in bounds as he slid across the boundary. And they said, we're going to review the process of the catch. Like, what? You just need more camera time? In case you guys don't know, here's the details. 6:05 to play. OU's up 31-17. Texas has the football. It's 3rd and 4. All right, so Texas is trying desperately to score. Ellinger drops back. He scrambles. He runs out of bounds. The clock, when he steps out of bounds, says 5:59. Switches from 6 minutes to 5:59. First, they give him a first down and say, you know what, we better review that. So they review it, of course, and they figure out that, you know what, he's short. Okay. So they had already spotted the football, and another 9 or 10 seconds after, okay, so the clock stops when he runs out of bounds. They spot the football, wind the clock, as they always do before every play. So now the clock's down to 5:50. Texas lines up to run the football on their little 4th and 1 play, whatever they were going to run, way back at their own 19-yard line. And the ref stops play, runs in there and says, please reset the game clock to 6:36. When he stepped out of bounds on the previous play with 5:59 and then wound the clock down to 5:50. So really, they added a total of 46 seconds. And like Parker said, for absolutely no reason. I remember the announcement, just like Parker just said, and I look up and I'm like, huh? They're going to add 36 seconds? I wonder why they would do that. But you know how it is. I mean, we're so busy writing our notes and tweeting and trying to get the post-game stuff ready. Goes right over my head. I don't even give it another thought. But then, guess who scores their tying touchdown with 14 seconds left on the game clock? Yeah, Texas. 14 seconds. The Big 12 has got some splaining to do. Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, is Lincoln Riley still considered a good head coach? Spoiler alert, yes, but he is human.
Hey there, loyal listeners. Parker Thune here with SI Sooners. Are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman, or a car dealership in Oklahoma City, or a restaurant in Edmond. Or maybe you're just a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonersi@gmail.com or send us a direct message on Twitter at @all_Sooners.
Final segment of the SI Sooners podcast. Okay, we got to talk about Lincoln Riley. Listen, I thought he had a relatively poor game down the stretch for one of the great geniuses and offensive geniuses for sure in college football today. When it comes to seeing the big picture and not taking risks versus taking risks or having a feel for how things are going in the game, I thought Lincoln kind of struggled. Let's just go down the list. Number one, fourth quarter, OU's up 31-24. Texas has already scored that one touchdown, the one we just talked about before the break. So they're trying to come back. OU dodged a bullet on the onside. When the onside kick, it just kind of bumps around and then goes out of bounds. So they dodged a bullet. Lincoln Riley's trying to run out the clock. Texas has called all of its timeouts on OU's previous possession, so there's about 2 minutes left. It's 3rd and 9, and instead of handing the football off, trying to wind down the clock, or maybe calling some kind of a run-pass option, like a bootleg to Jeremiah Hall, which has literally been OU's best play over the last 3 or 4 games this year. What does he do? He calls a pass, standard pass, drop back. Rattler throws it over the middle. He throws it behind Stogner. He actually threw it back kind of into the defender, the linebacker that was running with Stogner, and Stogner bats at the ball a couple times trying to get his hands on it. Listen, guys, 3 things can happen when you throw the football, and 2 of them are bad. That goes back to like 1908, I think, right? 1, you can catch it. 2, the other team can catch it. Or 3, nobody catches it. And then the clock stops and the other team has 40 more seconds to work with, right? I mean, Parker, I didn't like the call. I get trying to be aggressive, and that's kind of gotten, OU bit in the butt a little bit here and there. But if you're going to throw it, if you're determined to throw the football there, and Lincoln said, you catch one ball, you win the game. He's right. But Parker, don't go over the middle to your tight end with 2 defenders standing around him. That's not the play there ever. Not when you've got Jeremiah Hall and that bootleg action.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, on that play, Spencer Rattler did have Mikey Henderson wide open, jumping up and down for the ball on the left side of the end zone and just completely missed him and tried to force it to Stogner. So that's as much on Rattler as it is on Riley. But no, Riley's play calling in overtime, John, was really what was concerning to me, particularly in that second overtime. And we'll get to the third in a second. But in the second overtime, Lincoln Riley threw the ball on 1st and 2nd down from the 3-yard line. And, John, with 6 inches for a touchdown on 4th and goal, he tried to throw the ball again and got bailed out by the fact that Tom Herman called a timeout. He was going to throw the ball to get 6 inches. Listen, John, I don't care if it's the most predictable play call in the history of football. When you are 6 inches from the goal line, you run the quarterback sneak, especially given the fact that your center is a projected first-round NFL draft pick. There should have been absolutely no question what the Sooners were doing in that situation. And thankfully, after Herman called the timeout, Riley got a chance to reevaluate it and came to the proper decision. Spencer Rattler sneaks it. The Sooners take the lead, and we go to overtime number 3. Or I suppose they tied the game, rather, in that circumstance. But, John, in the third overtime, here's where a lot of people, I think, had frustrations with Riley. The decision to kick the field goal on 2nd down from the 14-yard line. And that, to me, suggests a lack of trust in Spencer Rattler more than anything. Because you have, granted, the most accurate kicker in college football in Gabe Brkic. Gabe Brkic had never missed a field goal in his collegiate career until last week at Iowa State. That miss was a 54-yard attempt in the rain. Gabe Brkic is as good as it gets. So I completely understand if you want to line the football up for Gabe Brkic in the middle of the field between the hashes and have him kick a chip shot. I get it. But the fact that they did that on 2nd down suggests to me that Riley does not trust Rattler to not turn the football over. And look, I can't really fault him for that to a certain extent, but it's a lot easier now to play armchair quarterback after the fact, given that Brkic inexplicably shanked the field goal and the Sooners had to go to overtime number 4 to win that football game. Now, I try so hard, John. I really do try so hard to give Lincoln Riley the benefit of the doubt. But the issue for me is these are patterns that we're starting to see. These are patterns. Yeah. We see Lincoln Riley throw the ball in goal-to-go situations. Why? why does he not trust the offensive line, especially given the fact that the Sooners had been winning the battle up front against Texas? If you're taking yesterday as an example, they've been winning the battle in the trenches all day. TJ Pledger had 131 yards and 2 touchdowns at that point. Why wouldn't you trust your running game? And I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, John. I don't know if there's a lack of chemistry and practice in that offensive line room or what the issue might be. But to me, the fact that Lincoln Riley continues to make these questionable play calls in really crucial situations for Oklahoma is really concerning.
It's out there for sure. I think it's I think he's above to a large degree being criticized by some idiot sports writers for his play calling. He's earned that benefit of the doubt, as you called it. But at the same time, he's going against convention to the point where you scratch your head. Listen, that goal line play that you mentioned, it looked to me like when Spencer got the ball and started dropping back to pass, he was looking for a receiver over the middle again in the goal line where 11 Texas defenders were lining up. Basically 10 Texas defenders were lining up. Boy, that would have been dangerous if he'd have got that play off, if he'd have thrown the ball over the middle or something, or had to throw a fade out. Because what's easy to overlook here, that was fourth down. He came out on 4th and inches after the Tom Herman timeout, and he ran the sneak. I don't know if he came to his senses or if Creed Humphrey got in his face and said, just run the damn quarterback sneak up my backside. But what does he do? He comes out after the timeout, power formation again, and runs the quarterback sneak up Creed's backside. I mean, it was fourth down. If not for Tom Herman, who knows how that thing could have turned out, Parker. And then the field goal you mentioned, this is the one. The third one that I wanted to get to is I just wondered, what the heck is he thinking? Because, man, I even asked him about it in the postgame. You're kicking a 31-yard field goal, Lincoln, on second down to win the game? To beat Texas? I mean, like you said, Gabe Burkage, money. He kicked a 31-yarder, same distance, at Baylor last year, money. Absolutely stone cold. Deserves all the credit in the world. But I think we know now why Jalen Hurts turned his back and literally couldn't watch, when Burkage was lining up for that kick down at McLean Stadium in Waco. But even that one was on fourth down, I think. This one was second down. 2017. Parker, we talked about this game last night at dinner. Did Austin Seibert's massive choke job at the end of regulation against Army in 2017 not teach you that even the best college kickers are reliable? Not even the best college kickers are reliable. There's no such thing as automatic when it comes to college kickers. No such thing. It is a fairy tale. Why would you ever put that much pressure on a freaking college kicker to beat Texas? My gosh. Here's the deal with that one. At that point, in my opinion, Texas was cooked. They were whipped. They were done. OU had just gotten that gift on Texas' previous possession when Perion Winfrey rose up, broke through, blocked the Cameron Dickers 33-yard field goal. You had just picked up the first down. I believe the first play was a 9-yard pass on a little throw to Jeremiah Hall. Picked up 9 yards. Thank you very much, right? It's a good play. Run it. And then an easy 2-yard run by Marcus Major that got you the first down. Easy 2-yard run. Texas was not going to stop you there. But instead of kind of reading what was happening in the game and trying to power the offense into the end zone, or at least getting an offense a little closer for Burkage, on first down, you have Rattler dance around and kneel in between the hash marks, which is exactly what you had Kyler Murray do at the end of the Army game 3 years ago at home. That blew up in your face when Seibert gacked. Riley said he'd do it again, Parker. Now, that last part, I think, is just a coach saying, it is a nice way of a coach telling a sports writer, I'm the coach, you're the sports writer, But if he does it again, that's just being bullheaded. If he does it again and it happens again, you're hurting your team to prove a point, and that's just idiotic, Parker.
Yeah, certainly. And, Gabe Burkage has nerves of steel. We know that. And the reality is, if he does his job yesterday, and he makes the kick just like he's made every other kick but one over the course of his first 2 seasons as Oklahoma's kicker, we're not sitting here having this conversation. But that's not the way that things played out. And I would hope John, I would hope that those two instances, Seibert in 2017 or 2018 against Army,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
then Burkich yesterday against Texas, teaches Riley that, okay, you know what? Maybe it's not the greatest idea to put my kicker in that kind of a situation unless absolutely necessary, and continue to rely on my offense to punch the ball in, because the Sooners were moving the ball well at that point on offense, John. It's not as if they had been stonewalled. And I would have liked to see at least a couple more run plays, get you a couple yards closer, give Burkich a little bit more margin for error, especially, and I feel like I've said this a million times, TJ Pledger was running the ball so well yesterday. 22 carries, 131 yards, 2 touchdowns, and the Sooners' offensive line was just dominating Texas's front seven. So I would like to see a couple more plays there to try to get the Sooners a little closer. But again, I give Riley a pass on that one for the most part, because I understand if you want to put the game in the hands of the most accurate kicker in college football and trust him to do his job. 99 times out of 100, Burkich makes that kick. It just so happened that yesterday, that 1 out of 100 was the one that was the attempt that he ended up taking and missing.
Yeah. And they ended up winning the game, so no harm done, right? Now, listen, I want to give Lincoln Riley all the credit in the world for something you mentioned earlier that I don't think a lot of coaches would have had the nerve to do. I didn't think Lincoln would have the nerve to do this. He benched his starting quarterback. So, yeah, he's made some crazy play calls or some crazy decisions or some curious ones maybe. But when it comes to coaching his guys and having a feel for how they are interpreting things and how they're performing and what their mental state is, he's nails on that. I think when it was apparent that Rattler had lost his poise with those 2 early turnovers, it was not quite, whatever, up for the big moment, I guess. Lincoln Riley pulled the plug and benched him. I'm sorry, but that's impressive. If you think about it, this was his guy. Kind of as a hand chosen, recruited him as a freshman, Johnny 5-star, Mr. Netflix, all that hype. You handpicked him from the preseason competition, you say, and, he won the job. And then he comes out, he doesn't play well in crunch time against Kansas State. He doesn't play well in crunch time against Iowa State. And here he is, early stages against Texas. He's kind of peeing down his leg a little bit. It's like you could see maybe some time off might do this kid some good. But who does that? What coach does that? Who pulls their starting quarterback, their guy? Well, I didn't know this, but Lincoln Riley does. That was impressive. I thought that showed a lot of maturity on Lincoln's part. He coached his guy up. He coached him. And then he said, instead of being bullheaded, he said, instead of being bullheaded and saying, now, you know what? I've made this decision. I'm a coach. I know what I'm doing. We're going to ride Mordecai all the way. Riley himself took a step back. He looked at the big picture and he said, nah, you know what? I picked this kid for a reason. He won the job for a reason. He's the guy. I just need to build him back up, get him back in there, call some plays that will give him a quick hit of confidence. And Parker, that's exactly what happened. I thought Rattler grew up, and I was impressed by the way Lincoln Riley handled him.
Yeah, certainly. And yesterday was big for Oklahoma as a team, but definitely big for Lincoln Riley as a coach and huge for Spencer Rattler as a quarterback, being able to come in as a redshirt freshman and defeat Sam Ehlinger in the Red River Showdown. And he needed a little help from Mordecai, obviously, to make it happen. But that was the biggest stage that Spencer Rattler has been on as of yet as a collegiate quarterback. And he passed the test. I wouldn't say he passed it with flying colors, but he did what he had to do to get the Sooners a victory in the end. And that speaks volumes for his grit as a quarterback. He's got a long way to go. And I think just about everybody would agree on that, John. But Spencer Rattler is a guy that Oklahoma can rely on at the quarterback position. And Lincoln Riley is going to go down. If this ship is going to go down, Lincoln Riley is going to send this ship down with his guy at the quarterback position, I believe. And Spencer Rattler is going to be Oklahoma's starting quarterback next week. He'll continue to start for the rest of the season, barring injury. He's the guy that has earned Riley's trust. And, that trust wavered a little bit on Saturday, but Rattler certainly did enough over the final 2 quarters and the 4 overtime periods to earn that trust back in Riley's eyes, in my opinion.
Hey, don't miss our next podcast on Wednesday. It is an open date this weekend, but we don't care. Parker and I don't care. We're working this weekend just like the football team that you guys follow. I want y'all to send us your mailbag questions. Hit me up on Twitter at John E. Hoover or hit Parker up at Parker Thune. Mailbag segment, guys. doesn't work without y'all. So help us out. Listen to the SI Sooners podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts, or tell your Amazon-enabled device, this is my favorite part, Alexa, play the SI Sooners podcast, and just enjoy the dulcet tones of Parker Thune. Or go to allsooners.com, click on the player, and listen on your phone, your tablet, your computer. Listen on your browser, whatever device you got, it'll play. And watch the video version on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. For Parker Thune, I'm John Hoover. See you guys.